Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Tuesday everybody. The breathless developments over the weekend in Russia took many by surprise, few more so than Beijing. Chinese leadership was likely shocked and disturbed by the Wagner incident. The PRC government was slow to react to the events, being, like so many of us in the initial hours, unsure what exactly was happening and what the implications would be. When Beijing did make an official statement, it played it very safe, with a PRC Foreign Ministry spokesperson making the following short statement on the incident. Quote, "This is Russia's internal affair. As Russia's friendly neighbor and comprehensive strategic partner of coordination for the new era, China supports Russia in maintaining national stability and achieving development and prosperity." End quote. On Sunday, Foreign Minister Qin Gang and Vice Foreign Minister Ma Jiaoxu held talks with the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister in Beijing, who was already there for a pre-planned visit. State media reports only that the conversation was, quote, "on the Ukraine crisis and other international and regional issues of common concern," end quote. State media, while initially cautious in its reporting of the incident, soon felt comfortable to take a strong pro-Putin view with anti-NATO sentiments. Quote, "The revolt has been quelled in a short time with limited impact on Putin's authority. Rather than defining it as a real rebellion, it should be seen as a power struggle, as the challenger has not brought up any anti-Putin slogans or targeted Putin's authority. Exaggerating the aftermath of the incident is part of the West's anti-Russia cognitive warfare." End quote. Some widely shared Chinese commentaries give us an idea of how elites are initially discussing the weekend's events. Quote, "This event fully demonstrates Russia's national character and modern-day power politics. Although the crisis has been resolved on the surface, the mutiny by the Wagner Group reveals that social, economic and political problems have been rising since the Russia-Ukraine conflict." End quote. And, quote, "This has been a very sobering incident. Maybe the incorporation of mercenaries into the Russian army was the best option for both the Russian government and the Wagner Group, but it reminds us of the Chinese saying about feeding a tiger and then inviting trouble. The conflict between mercenaries and the Russian army is only the tip of the iceberg about the inherent contradictions in Russian society. This may not have amounted to a civil war, as some media outlets have suggested, but it undoubtedly rings an alarm bell for Russia." End quote. Indeed, Western commentators agree that, while we cannot know what top Chinese leadership is thinking about all of this, we can be sure that this has at the very least reinforced, in their minds, the critical importance of complete control over the military. Quote, "Internally, what Xi and his advisors are thinking, we have no idea. But as many others have argued, one of the biggest risks to the PRC from Putin's invasion of Ukraine is that the disaster leads to his removal. And it is hard to argue that Putin's position is more secure today than it was before the weekend. It is likely a good reminder, not that he needs another one, to Xi to never allow the formation of private military companies, and to always ensure the party controls all military power. Whether or not the weekend mess has any bearing on calculations over Taiwan, I have no idea." End quote. And quote, "What's happened in Russia reinforces the message that Xi Jinping needs to continue to maintain a very, very tight grip and continue to be suspicious of the military." End quote. Over the weekend, a Weibo account operated by the People's Liberation Army published a post about how Mao Zedong reformed the military in 1927 to ensure, quote, "the party retained absolute leadership over the army." End quote. Okay, next up. On Monday, yesterday, a new law on so-called patriotic education was submitted to the National People's Congress Standing Committee for its first reading. We don't have many details currently related to the proposed legal changes, but we have learnt a few things through parts of the draft being published and some commentaries through state media. According to the draft, quote, "Patriotic education covers areas such as ideology and politics, history and culture, national symbols, the beauty of the motherland, national unity and ethnic solidarity, national security and defense, and the deeds of heroes and role models." End quote. The draft adds, quote, "While all citizens should undertake patriotic education, the education of children and young people should be prioritized." End quote. State-run Xinhua writes that the draft specifies that schools at all levels should integrate patriotic education into the entire educational process. It emphasizes, for example, quote, the importance of providing quality ideological and political theory courses and integrating patriotic education content into various subjects. End quote. Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post also reports that the draft law requires online content providers to strengthen the creation and dissemination of patriotic content. This would, quote, require online content and service providers to develop and use new platforms, technologies, and products to actively spread patriotism online, end quote. Okay, next up, and the final development to cover today, more disappointing economic data. If you guys are enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. It's just me making all this content every day, but knowing that it adds value for you guys is tremendous motivation. So thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Anyone who can go the extra mile and help keep the channel financially sustainable, I rely primarily on subscriber support to keep the channel going. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Next up, last week was China's Dragon Boat Festival holiday period. Analysts like to examine spending and travel rates during holiday periods as they act as good proxies for consumption strength and household confidence. Unfortunately, China's domestic travel spending during the 3-day Dragon Boat Festival holiday this year, which fell Thursday to Saturday of last week, fell short of 2019 levels, in yet another sign that momentum is slowing in China's much-hoped post-COVID recovery. The only bright spot in the holiday data was in the box office. But for everything else, let's have a look. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin has provided some great images to visualize the situation, writing yesterday, quote, there's mounting evidence that China's economy is facing slowdown in recent weeks, end quote. While domestic tourism revenue increased 44.5% versus last year, when many cities were in lockdown, revenue was still 5.1% below 2019 pre-pandemic levels. We note that this is official data provided by the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, which was published on Sunday. The number of tourism trips reached 106 million, 12.8% above 2019 levels, suggesting that people travelled at higher rates, but were much less willing, or less able, to spend like they had pre-pandemic. Indeed, in a Sunday client note, Nomura Holdings Inc. analysts expressed, quote, the average spending per trip was about 16% lower than in 2019, signaling either a weaker intention to spend or less purchasing power, end quote. For a country trying to increase consumption to replace unhealthy drivers like property and infrastructure investment, as well as falling exports, this is not a positive sign. The Nomura note added, quote, as pent-up demand fades and the risk of an economic double dip becomes more real in coming weeks, we expect in-person services consumption to weaken further, end quote. International air travel returned to just 64.6% of its 2019 levels, still painfully behind the domestic flight rates. Will stimulus come? This is the question we have been following closely on China Update these last few weeks. Quote, we believe there are 6 main tools that policymakers will make use of in the second half of this year. Monetary policy easing, policy financial tools, local government special bonds, consumer spending stimulus from fiscal funds, special treasury bonds, and the relaxation of property market restrictions in some cities, accompanied by a boost in financing support from the central bank. End quote. Whether, and to what degree, Beijing uses these tools remains to be seen. And in another bad sign that policymakers are nervous about economic health and household confidence, in recent days, several well-known domestic financial writers, including Wu Xiaobo, were banned on Chinese social media platform Weibo after discussing the country's poor youth unemployment rate and the state of the stock market. The reason given by Weibo to justify the ban was that these accounts, quote, spread negative and harmful misinformation, end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful Tuesday wherever you are, and I will see you all tomorrow.